Buckeye fans, you've got a lot of homework to do. You got to catch up on all the commits. You've got a lot of studying to do, a lot of guys to learn about. 3 commits over the last week and 1 expected today. Appreciate you being here at Buckeyes Live right here at the Voice of College Football. Of course, my name's Mark. We got Steve Hellwagon here from Bucknuts 247 Sports. Hopefully, Tony Gerdeman on his way. Kevin Noon going to the Justin Hill commitment announcement, I believe. Steve, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. Just got back from mowing part of my yard. We've had such a little rain here in Ohio the last month that I only have to do half my yard because the back half is still growing, but the front is basically dead and gray. So there's no reason to even go over it. You wouldn't make a dent in it. So yeah, no reason to mow the front yard.
Yeah, it's that time that if unless you are an irrigation expert and want to spend a couple $100 a month watering your lawn.
Nope.
Yeah.
Don't care that much.
Exactly. I never understood that, Steve. I got to say this before we get to the football people want to hear about. I used to marvel. Now, I wanted to keep a nice lawn, mow the grass, have some flowers, maintain it, make it look halfway decent. Didn't want to be the embarrassment of the neighborhood, but I never understood living up north, just waiting and waiting and waiting. Couldn't wait to April, May, nice weather, and then people spending their entire weekends, perfecting their lawns. That just wasn't my cup of tea.
Hell no. Not me either. I'd rather be out playing golf if I could.
There you go. Okay, we are just about 90 minutes or so away from an announcement with one of the top edge rushers. No, we got with Justin Hill, one of the top edge rushers in the nation, and a big Buckeye lean here. We're expecting good news.
Well, I think so. I think I saw a comment there that there's been a lot of last-second Alabama talk, and I think it is between Ohio State and Alabama. Justin Hill is from Cincinnati Winton Woods, a school that's sent a lot of players to Ohio State over the years. I think Mayan Williams comes to mind first and foremost, recent vintage. Number 60 overall prospect in the country. So this is another blue chipper, a 4-star, number 7 edge rusher. He's listed 6'3", 220, but I imagine that weight is probably outdated. My guess is he's probably going to play a senior year closer to 230 or 240 and would probably come into Ohio State next, I presume in January, closer to 250 pounds, but a speed rusher. And as I discussed it with Mark Porter, who's one of the best in the business in terms of talent evaluation in the state of Ohio, he is a jack of all trades. He can be the speed rusher. He can drop into coverage. And he can also kind of roam the field and be a run stopper as well as a linebacker. So he's got a lot of skills. I looked up his stats at Winton Woods last year. He had 13 sacks, which is a nice number, certainly, for any high school player to have 13 sacks. Playing against pretty good competition down there. They don't play the Moelers and the Elders and those type of schools, the big St. X and the big Catholic schools, but their league is a pretty respectable Division I, Division II league in the Cincinnati suburbs there. And to me, this is setting up that Larry Johnson is bringing another one home here with Justin Hill. To me, again, I think he's a guy that has favored Ohio State kind of quietly and behind the scenes and, has tried to keep the suspense up for this announcement at 1 o'clock. And I guess we'll see how it all shakes out here. In as you said, a little over 90 minutes or so, he'll be making the announcement, I think, at Winton Woods High School down there. And we'll get the word just like everybody else around 1 o'clock. And then we'll be able to go on with the rest of our July 4th holiday.
Yes. Fortunately, he scheduled this before the July 4th holiday because, yes, we would all just be suspending our plans to wait for. Yes, this is the recruiting game that people play into. But I think Steve and I are a little bit more. We've been around the block a few times. We're not waiting on 17-year-olds. But Justin Hill.
Yeah, I was playing golf with my son and my dad one time on July 4th, and there was a basketball guy by the name of Daniel Giddens from Georgia, who committed to Ohio State on July 4th. And I had an inclination it was coming, so I brought the computer and my MiFi with me out on the golf course and clicked it all on right at the moment, saw that he committed, and hit live, on the story from the golf course. That was in the dying days of the Mata era. So about 10 years ago was when that probably happened. And so that's how savvy we are technologically, I guess.
Well, not to prioritize positions, but the more college football becomes like the NFL, and I would argue on the offensive side, the NFL has copied college football for the first time in its history. There are certain positions that stand out. Tackle, quarterback, of course, cornerback. You need those guys. There are very few that could hang with a wide receiver that's any good. And then it's edge rusher. So having those guys that can come off the edge, put pressure on the quarterback, change games. And some of these guys are going to hit, some are going to miss. So it's about the numbers game and collecting layers of 4 and 5 stars that stack on top of each other, knowing and hoping that the majority of them come through. But edge rusher, obviously, with a couple really good ones headed off to the NFL. Not that, of course, much is going to be expected of Justin Hill in 2025, but obviously for future seasons, him replacing some really talented players at that position.
No doubt. And when you look at Sawyer and Tuimoloau, who could potentially both be first-round picks or certainly first or second-round picks, their leaving will open up a lot of reps and a lot of plays for the younger guys coming in over the next several years. So definitely Hill's probably looking at that, as you said, it'd be unlikely that a freshman would come in and start, but to have the opportunity to be in the 2 deep as a true freshman, it is definitely a possibility if he rises to the top of that group during spring and fall camp next year.
Got Steve Hellwagon here from Bucknuts 247 Sports. And of course, it's our Buckeyes live show that you can see number 274. That's quite a few times, folks. So for about 5 to 6 years, Steve and Tony, also Kevin, have been here, reliable and delivering each and every week. We appreciate Super Chat contributions. We'll take your comments and questions. Steve, next.
If I can throw in real quick, Big Ten Network, I guess, this morning showed the 1995 Ohio State-Michigan game, the Tim Biaka-Batuka game, where they defeated the undefeated Ohio State team, and that's when Lloyd Carr got the battlefield promotion from interim coach to head coach that same day. And then I guess my buddy says now the 2007 Illinois-Ohio State game is on, the Juice Williams game, where they beat the undefeated Ohio State team. Ohio State actually came out of that one okay and ended up playing LSU for the national championship that season down in New Orleans. But as my buddy said, bleep you, Big Ten Network, is what he says, that they're showing 2 of the tough losses. This must be tough losses for Ohio State on Big Ten Network Day. And
they went.
Yeah, the only other thing I'll say is with these 4 new teams coming in and all the wealth of stuff that they're going to have that can be shown on Big Ten Network, I said this to Tony Petiti, why don't you have Big Ten Network too, where, you're constantly running, you'd have more live stuff going on, but they really believe the future is streaming. So it's unfortunate. Yes,
yeah,
Kevin,
obviously.
they would have played USC. Kevin asked, because Keyshawn Johnson and USC played Northwestern, and they beat Northwestern by like 10 points, I think. Pat Fitzgerald was with Northwestern then. So, yeah.
41-32. I remember my scores, Steve. I think I'm almost 100%.
You're better than me.
One.
You're better than me.
But, yes, the Illinois Classic and the Michigan Classic must have butted heads back-to-back, so the Buckeyes took the downer back-to-back. But searching for Illinois classics is a bit difficult, so they typically have to delve back into the 80s and 90s for those. But yeah,
they had no recording devices when Red Grange and Dick Butkus played.
Yeah,
and,
even Dick Butkus film.
Yeah, they didn't film or record the games back then. There was no way to do it. So, You have to have somebody narrate a recollection with some still photos.
Now, you will remember better than me, Steve, because you were at the game, the Juice Williams game in 07, and what some of you newer Buckeye fans may be unaware, Ohio State, number one in the country, get upset by Illinois, but they dropped to number 5. I think they actually dropped as low as number 7 in the country, but
they needed 5 or 6 teams. They were 7 or 8, and they needed 6 or 7 teams. They were maybe 7th, and they needed
7th,
and they needed 5 teams in front of them to lose. And guess what happened? 6 teams in front of them lost, and they moved all the way up to number 1. And they were the only one-loss team that was left. So LSU, with 2 losses, played them for the national championship in New Orleans and thumped Ohio State pretty good.
Only one loss outside of Kansas. Kansas was snubbed.
Yeah.
They were an 11-1 football team.
It's Kansas.
Kansas had a very odd season. They dodged Texas and Oklahoma, and like the 3rd best team in the conference, it might have been Missouri. So they got a very light schedule. So everyone discarded Kansas. Went on to win a major bowl game. It was 12-1.
Was Missouri the team that beat them, or who beat them?
Yeah, I believe it was Mizzou.
Missouri beat them.
Pounded them pretty well. So they didn't look good in their one showcase game. But what I remember about that Ohio State-Illinois game, I actually have gone back, and because I was thinking I went back immediately after the game. This is back in the day where I used to record the games and YouTube was barely a thing. But what I could not believe, and it's verified on videotape, is Illinois played the perfect final drive of that game. They got the ball back with a touchdown lead with like 7 minutes left in the game. And you couldn't have orchestrated a better way to just hold on to the football and barely gain any yardage. Just continue to convert third and 1, 4th and 1, and by this much, and just hang on to the football. And they only advanced to about the Ohio State 40 in all that time. They just drained the last 7 minutes of that game. It was
it was terrible, and the officiating did not help Ohio State. There were a couple of really bad calls. I think there was a situation where Juice Williams threw for a touchdown where it was an obvious pick play where somebody grabbed a defensive back or something in the back of the end zone to free a receiver. I mean, it was obvious, and they missed it. And that was the guy, Steve Pamone, who was the referee. A year or so later, they found out he had gambling debts or whatever too. So I'm not saying the game was rigged in any way. They just he never struck me as a great referee, and he just didn't have a lot of command for the game, and kind of in over his head at times it's felt like. And to put him on and his crew on that game and to get that result, wasn't what the Big Ten or anybody else was looking for.
And Illinois advanced to the Rose Bowl and put up one of the worst showings you could ever imagine. They were just completely annihilated. All right.
The Zucker.
Yes.
That was a shining moment.
Post Florida. All right, folks, we will move it up to 2024 and 2025, of course. Maxwell Roy, Steve, was a prime get from the last week defensive lineman. And the Penn State reach doesn't make its way all the way to Philadelphia much at the time. So that's a prime area and has been for the Buckeyes.
No question. Maxwell Roy, he is the latest guy in this Philadelphia St. Joe's prep pipeline following Kyle McCord and Marvin Harrison Jr. to Ohio State. Maxwell Roy, he looks the part, 6'3", 285-pound defensive lineman. He is ranked number 152, and he's the number 19 interior defensive lineman in the country. And a great get, obviously, for Ohio State. Larry Johnson just continues to stack up the talent there on the defensive line. Michigan, Rutgers. Oh, excuse me. I'm dying. Michigan and Rutgers were also right there in the mix for him. He took visits to those schools. And certainly Penn State missing out on a guy who's one of the top 5 players in Pennsylvania for the upcoming season. They had offered him, I'm just going through his offers, USC, Texas A&M, Oregon, Georgia. So he had everybody in the country after him. And Maxwell Roy picks Ohio State, latest defensive lineman. Obviously, that happened on Monday. And again, Larry Johnson is on a downhill roll. If he adds Justin Hill today, this will be quite a defensive line class, certainly for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, and certainly a defensive lineman with Trajen Odom, a guy who committed a couple days after the show last week, so we didn't catch up to him. 40th rated defensive lineman and a top 10 player out of the state of North Carolina, where the Buckeyes have done pretty well in recent years.
Yeah, Trajan, he's a little farther down the line in terms of the national rankings. Probably number 283 is what I'm reading here with the composite, and number 31 interior defensive lineman. And his commitment kind of came out of left field a little bit last week, but he had some great offers as well. He had visited USC, Oregon, and UCLA, as well as Ohio State. Alabama had offered him. So he's a bigger guy as well, in that 6'4", 285 range. So they have really done an outstanding job plugging the gap that they really have there at defensive tackle. They're going to have Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton playing there this year, but those guys will be gone after this upcoming season. His junior season, Trajen Odom had 22 tackles for loss and 54 tackles. So he's a very active defensive tackle. And to me, again, you can't have enough big guys who can run and make plays. And in this case, a nimble guy that can shoot gaps and gum up the run game, and also put a little bit of pressure on the opposing quarterback, collapse the pocket up the middle. That's what Ohio State has kind of lacked here, I think, here in recent years with some defensive tackle play. And I am interested to see, I wouldn't expect Odom to come in and be a guy that they're counting on to be a difference maker, in 2025, but maybe in 26, 27, 28, he's a guy that could really make some things happen for the Buckeyes. So, yeah, I think, again, filling a position of need is obviously very important, and I look at that certainly with what they were able to do there.
Steve, it seems to be a bit of a trend that Ohio State, even going back to Jim Tressel and Urban Meyer, filling out the bottom, or what could be program players, could turn out to be impactful players, depending. But usually the bottom of the recruiting rankings in regards to any particular class goes the Ohio State in-state route, and you get a tight end in Brody Lennon, who's 34th rated, and he's a Buckeye.
Yeah, the number 34 tight end in the country. So that doesn't, necessarily wow you that much. They had him at camp. Let's see, it would have been in late June, mid to late June. I was there the one day that Brody Lennon was there working out with Keenan Bailey. And I know that Chip Kelly came down to that field and watched him, and Ryan Day as well. And they all put their minds together and decided that they needed to offer Brody Lennon, and he subsequently has committed to the Buckeyes. He caught 32 passes and had 11 touchdowns during his junior season. He plays at Gilmore Academy, which is in Gates Mills, Ohio, up in the Cleveland area. And again, they're going to play probably Division II, Division III, Division IV type schools up in that area, Gilmore Academy. And he's a guy that, a bright guy that's going to come in and fill a role there at the tight end, bring his lunch pail. He's going to be a guy that's going to catch a few passes, but is also going to be counted on in the blocking game as he grows and develops. He took visits to several really good places recently, Missouri, Wisconsin, and Kentucky, where his other finalists took visits to all of them in the month of June. But it was Ohio State, his last visit on June 21st, that settled it for him. He committed, I think, almost on the spot or right after, I guess, his visit. So Congrats to Brody Lennon, another Ohio guy in this class. And as I kind of look at the makeup of this class, my goodness, I mean, it just grows by the day. If they get Justin Hill today, that would give them 23 verbal commitments, and it's only July 3rd. The guys can't sign until sometime in December. I think maybe they moved that up to earlier December for the signing day. So Justin Hill would be 23, and Justin Hill would be the 9th guy from Ohio. So just under 50% of the class from the state of Ohio. And I think that they are still going to sign another 3, 4, maybe even 5 more guys and get up to 27 or 28. I wonder if Ryan Day and the coaching staff are operating under some assumption that the NCAA is going to lift the 85 scholarship restriction, as has been kind of rumored around with the proliferation of NIL, and take it to 90 or 95. And they're figuring that they can take some extra guys in this class. Certainly there'll be some juniors that are on the current Ohio State team that are going to leave after the upcoming season. I would think Quinshon Judkins, for example, will be leaving. I would think Josh Simmons, the offensive tackle, if he has the kind of year that he's hoping to have, would leave as well for the NFL. So you got a few guys that have the potential to leave as draft eligible guys that would open up more spots for more high school players to sign. And obviously there'll be some transfer portal departures as well after the upcoming season. So, I just look at it that it looks like space is getting tight in this class, but don't believe maybe everything you see and hear, I suppose.
Look at this. Blue Wolverine sends us a super sticker here on Buckeyes Live. So Blue Wolverine, I believe you are locked in on our Michigan channel. Of course, they go live over on the Michigan channel here at the Voice of College Football every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So Buckeye fans, head on over there again Tuesday and Thursday nights with John, TJ, and the crew over there on the Michigan channel. But Blue Wolverine, thank you so much for the contribution there. Steve, to put a little context on this class, let's roll with the numbers here because I was curious to see a couple things here. So we see it every year, not with the likes of Ohio State or Alabama, but with the likes of maybe a Rutgers. I think they're the ones this year. Tony, what's going on?
Not much. Sorry. I'm sorry. I apologize to everybody. I apologize to you, Mark. I apologize
No.
Steve.
No apologies necessary.
Good. I take it all back.
Yeah. We're all busy people.
274 shows, and Tony's at like 272.3. So I think we can excuse that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We are diving into some recruiting rankings, and maybe we'll circle back, Tony, if you've got anything on the recent commits or the Justin Hill commitment announcement today. But what I wanted to see here was obviously the average player ranking. So what I was starting to address is you always see that outlier or two schools during the summer, like a Rutgers, I think was number 12 here recently, but it's kind of bolstered by numbers and not necessarily quality. And then they quickly drop to where they're supposed to be. On the flip side, what's impressive about Ohio State is as soon as I heard Steve, you say 23 commits most likely coming today, I thought, okay, I'm sure their average is exceptional, but it is basically number one in the country. Now, if you go down the average player ranking, it is not technically number one in the country. You got LSU at 94.01, which is a smidge ahead. But as you guys know as well as I do, it's going to be difficult for LSU with only 12 commits to maintain that kind of average with another 10 or 12 players coming into the class. So despite the losses, and maybe I'll start you out here, Tony, because what was as much the talk around Ohio State recruiting circles this week, in addition to the commits, were the guys that were missed that both headed to Eugene, Oregon. Dorian Brew, of course, the cornerback, and then you've got Jordan Davison, the running back, and a lot of Buckeye fans not real happy about that, and going to a conference rival now.
Well, and we may be adding Trey McNutt to that one as well. the Ohio safety who could end up at Oregon. But that's life in the NIL era, and that's life in the common era now with the way Oregon has been, the brand that has been built since what Joey Harrington and Keely Smith that has continued to grow, and it's in a healthy place now. And Ohio State can't just expect to sweep up the Big Ten, and they've been able to do that in the recruiting rankings for basically the last 20 years, 25 years or so, and now they're going to have to work a little bit harder. The thing that's interesting to me is the in-state stuff. You would like to lock that down as they always would, and I don't know if you guys. There's a little bit of Alabama buzz right now with Justin Hill, so I don't know if that's going to be something we'll need to watch, but see if that comes to fruition. But the average star rankings or the average recruiting rankings, Ohio State normally does pretty good at that. Top 3, top 4, sometimes the number 2 with the Georgia or Alabama, who's ever leading at that point. But it is interesting to watch Oregon come in and be what Michigan hasn't been able to be in terms of recruiting, and what Penn State hasn't been able to be. It'll be interesting to see if USC can get there. Now, they've lost a bunch of guys from the Southeast from decommitting, so they've got this. They cast a net and they catch some fish, but they lose them on shore, and so we'll see how USC does. But I think it's going to be Ohio State, Oregon battling in the recruiting rankings for the foreseeable future, or at least until Dan Lanning takes the Cowboys job after this year.
Do you think that Ohio State, having gotten commitments from what is it, 3 of the top 4 cornerbacks in the nation, something in that range, something ridiculous, could have made Dorian Brew reconsider?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And there are some that believe he's more of a safety than a corner anyway. And so, yeah, you've got the top 2 corners committed in Devin Sanchez and Naeem Offord, and Dorian Brew becomes number 3. And so you go, do I want to be number 3 or do I want to be number 1? And you can ask the same question of Jordan Davison. Do I want to be the 3rd running back commit, or do I want to be number 1 at Oregon? Do I want to be the guy at Oregon? And so you've got some timely situations for the Ducks. They've been able to come in and grab some guys. I wonder what would happen if Brew hadn't moved to Texas. If he had stayed in Ohio, would he be committed to Ohio State at this point? But again, it's not like they've locked Ohio down completely in the top 5. And they'll still be recruiting Trey McNutt. They'll still be going after him and trying to get him there. But you can't recruit enough defensive backs. I think with the Dorian Brew thing, it kind of reminds me of the Javen Boggs decommitment receiver who was committed to Ohio State for a while, decommitted. He said, I want to go where I'm needed, not wanted. Ohio State for receivers. They want receivers right now. They don't necessarily need them. Other places need receivers. And so I think Dorian Brew, go where you're needed, not wanted. Ohio State doesn't necessarily need him. They just obviously wanted him. But you get a better shot at playing at corner at Oregon, in his opinion.
Another angle to this kind of a new battle that's being waged with NIL being a component involved, although we do see the same cast of characters at the top of the recruiting rankings. Even it's not like Louisville has surged out of nowhere and is suddenly a recruiting giant or something. I think a lot of people were anticipating that. My thought going into all this was, well, the same schools that have the resources to build all the fancy facilities, it's probably the same schools that are going to have the resources to transition to this era. And I know it's not an exact transition, but what I was getting to was there's this thought out there among other college football fan bases. They criticize Ohio State and a few others that, well, once Quinshon Judkins walked in the door and Will Howard and Caleb Downs, well, they're buying a team, although they're still recruiting in the top 2 or 3 and 4 in the country, and that there's this arms race between Ohio State and Oregon, and then this gives more credence to that, a number 1 ranking here for Ohio State, and then Oregon picking up 2 prime prospects this week.
Well, you know, everybody wants to throw shade at everybody else. You know, Ohio State is buying its team. Well, Oregon bought Bo Nix, Washington bought Michael Penix, and Washington ends up in the national championship game, and Oregon, you know, was just as good. You know, we saw those games between those teams. You know, they were right there with them, and Oregon's bringing in, what is it, Dylan Gabriel this year. They bought him. So everybody is buying players. Your team's buying players. Our team's buying players. Their team's buying players. Just go buy the best players you can get is kind of it's 2024, and this is the landscape now. What you know, what was, and what is today is what is today. And you know, what can I say? I mean, that's just the weight of it is, and everybody is going to have X amount of dollars to commit to personnel in this new paradigm. And that's, you know, Alabama could be upset about it that Ohio State bought, you know, 3 of their best players, but, you know, go out and take 3 really good players away from Auburn or Georgia or Florida or whoever, Florida State. I mean, everybody has the same ability to do it. It's just, you know, do kids want to play at your school? That's what it kind of comes back to, and how much money you could spend.
I'm just looking at On3's transfer portal rankings, and it looks like they also incorporate your losses. So Ohio State has like the number 51 transfer portal rankings, which puts them at like, I don't know, 7 or 8 in the Big Ten. But they brought in 8 guys. Caleb Downs chose Alabama over Ohio State, so that was a top 2 thing. You know, Will Howard as a quarterback, you're a free agent now. Where are you going to go look? Oh, Ohio State doesn't have a starting quarterback. I mean, that's a no-brainer. The only surprising one, I think, is Quinshon Judkins choosing to go to a place with a running back. Although at that point, there's probably a safe assumption that Travion Henderson was leaving for the NFL. So you're looking at Ohio State like there's nobody there. And even if there is somebody there, Quinshon Judkins has had to carry the load for 2 years straight. But he's also been able to split the load at times, but he gets a lot of carries. So him getting 100 fewer carries than he did last year and the year before that, I don't think is a bad thing for him. He can be a 1-2 punch or a 1-1 punch. You know, Will Kazmarek, as I've said before, when he came over from Ohio, nobody cared. People laughed when Will Howard came in. It's like, ha, you're stuck with Kansas State's quarterback. People only really started getting angry, I think, with the just Julian Sayin thing. Then it was like, what the heck, you know? But that's another guy. If there was no Quinn Ewers committed to Ohio State, that created a situation, or Dylan Raiola rather, that created a situation where Julian Sayin ended up at Alabama. He was always very interested in Ohio State, but he chose Alabama, and Ohio State was right there. And so you lose Nick Saban. Who do you turn to? You turn to the team that you had the best connection with, and it was Ryan Day, and it wasn't Kalen DeBoer. So it's also about connections as much as money, because there are a bunch of players Ohio State missed out on that they wanted. You know, they got the guys that wanted to come to Ohio State, and you know, they supplement their roster, and you can't buy a championship, but you can purchase the components to give yourself a really, really good chance. And as I'll keep saying, this is the most difficult championship that anybody is going to win this year. It's never going to be more difficult. It has never been more difficult than it will be this year. So whatever it takes to get it done, I would consider it money well spent, because it's going to be unlike anything we've ever seen. It's going to be the toughest road that anybody has ever had to take. And so you got to get there as best you can with as best a team as you can to give yourself as best an opportunity and chance to win it all.
Well, the dynamics of the math is a bit interesting, because Ohio State was roughly making the playoffs. Well, not roughly. I think they were making the playoffs half the time. And now they should be making the playoffs 95% of the time. And therefore, your entry into the shot at the national championship is much easier. But once you get there, it's a 3 or 4 game gauntlet. So you can look at it both ways. But I would agree. Yeah, this is going to be more difficult. Yeah.
It's easier to get there, but it's tougher to good luck once you get there. And it's much more difficult this way than it was for Jim Tressel, Urban Meyer, Woody Hayes, who won a national championship before he even played in a bowl game. I mean, it's a completely different world now than it was anytime before.
Wayne Taylor,
thank you. Just Steve, listening to Urban Meyer talk about going through the gauntlet that they had to in 2014 or whatever, like his team would have died if they had to play one more game. They never would have been able to do it because of the physical toll on everything. And, having to play another one or two playoff games after that. I mean, it sounded like an impossibility just a handful of years ago.
I've been messing around with these realignment models here this week. So our tact here at the Voice of College Football is we're not ones that throw crap at the fan and just talk realignment all the time and all these speculations all the time. Number one, there's got to be news. Number two, there's got to be somebody who said something that could be configured as news, somebody in some authoritative capacity. So other than that, we're having fun with realignment models. You get these leagues up to a certain number that are being projected here once we get into the 20 to 24 range, and it's going to be difficult to configure a league where you don't need to have a mini playoff, a semifinals within the league to determine at least a valid champion. You can do it. You can just line them up 1 through 24 and have a crazy tiebreaker system. But shoot, we've seen with all the speculation of what a three-way tie could have looked like the last couple of years with Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, where you're knocking down tiebreakers to where you're splitting first down totals between the teams, and you would be looking at that kind of situation that you almost have to play a mini playoff within your conference to determine who gets to the playoffs. Or wins a conference championship, which is going to be meaningless going forward. It's just,
that's
I don't
crazy.
know what they're going to do. Eliminate a game during the regular season?
Well, what's crazy about that is, now you've got up to 4 games in the playoff, and now you want to have a 2-game Big Ten playoff too, where maybe the top, let's say it's a 20-team league, and maybe you play 9 games in division, and maybe one crossover opponent from the other division for 10 league games. And then the top 2 teams in each division play each other to decide their division. And then the 2 winners play for a championship game. Now you've added another game for these guys somewhere on the schedule to play. And, maybe you do that as I don't know, as I'm thinking out loud, maybe that becomes the 12th game on everybody's schedule is Big Ten wild card in week 12, that, you have that playoff and I don't know, maybe that's how it goes.
I think you can do that. And I've said it before, you do it just like they did it in 2020, where everybody played championship weekend. You make that 12th game.
Yeah, everybody else got matched up.
The 9th Big Ten game is the semifinal the semifinal, and then the 5 plays 18 or whatever the hell it is at that point, and you just pair everybody up that way, and it doesn't really create anything else. It creates a fluid schedule, which I think is interesting. I think you're gonna eventually, you can make money on a conference semifinal game, more money than you can on Indiana, Purdue, or something like that. All of these different rivalry games. But then again, the rivalry game moves up a week. The rivalry week moves up a week. But I think you can, if that's what you want to do, and that is a scenario like how can we get a semifinal? You can just create a fluid week in that 12th game of the season, because they did it in 2020. Yeah. We learned a lot of things in 2020. Yep. Things can be now. No, there are no fans, so that made it easier. But fans, I to say we can't do it, I think that's false and lazy.
The 18-team league actually makes it work, because you could play nine regular season Big Ten games against everybody in your division. Well, would that be, you'd have 2 9-team divisions. You could play 8. You could play the other 8 teams, and then have the semifinal as the 9th game, or the wild card games for everybody else, and still play 3 non-conference games at the beginning. So, this is a perfect scenario to do it the way they've got it set up now. If they wanted to, I don't know what the clamor is for that. Certainly, the league splits up almost perfectly with, I think it would be maybe Illinois in the Eastern Division, and the Eastern time zone teams would be 9, and then the rest of the Central and Pacific Coast teams would be 9 on the other side. So perhaps that's a way they could do it.
I don't think we're going to go back to divisions.
Probably not.
Which is then it becomes like, well, what do you don't probably need semifinal things, but it's like if it creates another game that if the networks want it, they'll get it. Basically, I think is the answer to every question that we have, every scenario that we have. Would the networks like it? Then it'll happen. If the network's like, yeah, no, we're good without it, we don't have room for it, then it becomes not necessary.
So, Tony, thank you so much for shedding light on how stupid I've been this week, because I completely forgot about that. I've produced, I don't know how many videos, and we saw it on 2020. And I love that, because I'm the nerd that will enjoy that. Oh, Purdue's going to play Maryland at noon on Saturday. I'll catch some of that game. And I would love the semifinals actually to not be played back to back. I think I would like a Friday, Saturday, but regardless, what's funny about this is that either you're going to have, let's say, 2 10-team divisions as you guys lined up, and that you're playing 9 teams in your division and you're never playing anyone in the other division. That's one scenario. Or even if you play one team with a 10-game conference schedule, or this wild card, which is going to be completely random, of course, especially for the teams that aren't going to make this 4-team semifinal. After the league just sold us on this new scheduling formula and how balanced it is, and everyone's going to see everyone at least one every 2 years, that suddenly Ohio State could never see Minnesota, or see them once every 10 years, I guess.
Yeah. Just gives me a headache thinking about it.
It gives you a headache, Steve. It gives me content ideas.
I go back to that whole thing again. It was the 90s. I think they combined like all the minor league teams out on the West Coast in one 16-team league, and it lasted 5 years because, the bottom half of that league was getting their brains beat in, and there was no hope and no money for them, and it fell apart. Plus, as Ryan Day said, I kind of ambled up to him on the sideline at one of the camps, and it's like, how are the Big Ten meetings out in LA? And he said, you put 16 people in a room, you can't get people to agree on anything. And that's part of the problem. I think what's going to happen is ultimately the presidents and the athletic directors are going to look at anybody who raises a stink about this and say, this is our budget. And this, that big check they give the guy at the end of the golf tournament is what the Big Ten gives us. And you need to make it work out, because, we ain't going back there. So we're not going back to 1/3 the money from the Pac-12. So that ain't happening. So that's where it's at.
David Greenshield's comment here about Jim Harbaugh having a losing record against Ohio State reminds me of a shorts idea that I have. Not shorts actually that you put on, but folks, YouTube shorts idea that I have, because that's the way to build a channel, folks, apparently, is to produce these shorts constantly, which I don't do. But I want to ask everyone in the audience, as I produce this short, and I will be reciting the Ohio State-Michigan series record during my lifetime, that I want everyone in the chat to comment back, what is the series record during your lifetime? That's simply, there's going to be no lean, no opinion, just simply, I want that response from everyone.
I don't know, Mark. I see quite a few 3-year-olds in there, so I think you'll see some 3-0s in there. I will say, it took Jim Harbaugh 7 years at Michigan to beat Ohio State. So, I mean, things take time. There are ebbs and flows, and again, it's a rivalry. Nobody owns it. anybody should be able to win it, and it can go from place to place, year to year, and the bluster is part of the fun, even if it doesn't seem like it sometimes for some people.
Well, Tony, with Justin Hill coming in today for that decision, you shed some light on possibly Alabama making a move there. I think a lot of people had Justin Hill penciled in as a Buckeye, but we shall see here in just about 65 minutes. Between Maxwell Roy, you got Trajen Odom coming in here, Brody Lennon, the tight end in state. Any thoughts about any of those guys?
Well, I think if you can land Justin Hill, this is a very, very, very good defensive end class. I think it would be like 4 guys in the top 135 among defensive ends, and they need that because they've missed on some guys. But overall, the defensive line class is looking pretty good, and they're not done yet. They're going to try to continue working on Malik Autry, who's committed to Auburn, who's a big, big nose tackle and very close to some other members of the Ohio State recruiting class. But I like Brody Lennon. Kind of reminds me of Jake Stoneburner back in the day, his high school highlights, an athletic guy who can run, but will need to get bigger like every tight end, except for maybe Jelani Thurman that comes to Ohio State. It takes him a little time to size up. But the camp offers are always interesting, and coaches get a firsthand look. They're putting them through the test. These are kind of the job interview that you have to nail. And so when you nail it, I think that means something. Sometimes it means you've missed on some guys nationally, so you have to offer some guys in state, and that happens as well. But I think the defensive line class is pretty good at this point. Could get better today, and could get better moving forward. But overall, it's June, or now it's July, and we talk about this every year when we have Notre Dame fans in the chat last year and the year before talking about Notre Dame's #1 class in June in the summer. It doesn't mean anything right now in terms who is leading right now. It will not most likely generally isn't leading in December, and certainly not in February. I think it is very interesting, however, how Alabama has already jumped out front to where they are, and it's different than what Nick Saban used to do. Like Nick Saban at this point in the past would be like 14th, and then you just wait until November, December when they start shooting up the rankings and everybody else starts to drop back a little bit. I don't expect Ohio State to have the #1 class just because it's never happened. They've had #2 a couple of times. So I think if you can get David Sanders, that's going to help. And if you can keep your guys in state, that would help as well. But I'm part of I'll believe it when I see it. Now they may have the best average ranking of recruits, but leading this early, I think, is kind of like a lot of other races. Maybe you're, do you want to be leading this early in the Kentucky Derby type of thing, or do you want to come from, a little ways back and conserve your energy?
And I know we've had this conversation before. It doesn't matter necessarily. We don't know until the guys actually get on the field and start playing, and we can reevaluate them. If you're #1, you're #4, you're #3, just so you're in the running. But do you think there's any value to finishing #1 beyond the actual football players on the field and how good the class is to show Ohio State is the #1 recruiting class in the country?
Yeah. Well, Steve, Urban Meyer used to say, "Hey, they're keeping track of it. We might as well win it. Like their rankings, we want to win it." So there's value in that. There's bragging rights. There's just the idea that everybody has done their job, and you can tout that. And then so much of this stuff is about social media and trying to build a snowball effect. So I think there's a positive. I don't know how tangible on the field it is, other than the fact that if you've got the class that is actually ranked #1 after the fact, that's much better than before the fact. Like 3 years down the road, if this, in fact, the recruiting rankings were correct, congratulations on hosting some sort of a trophy. But I don't know what the tangible impact of it is, though.
Yeah, I think it's good for attention in the off season and good thing to talk about when there's no football going on. But, once preseason camp starts, that's when you find out who can actually play the game of football. And there's been a lot of top-rated guys who couldn't actually play college football. And a lot of guys like Chris Olave, who were not, national top 50 players, who end up going out in the first 15 picks of the NFL draft. So, it's kind of it's a great starting point to have the biggest, fastest, strongest X's and O's, but they also have to be able to play football to be able to justify that. So, I take it all with a grain of salt. Again, fill your needs, get quality people who you don't worry looking around in 3 or 4 years whether they're still going to be there or not. They're not chasing false idols. They're there for the right reasons. They're there, presumably to get an education and improve at football and potentially put themselves in position to play in the NFL. I mean, that's what you want from these guys. And, that's what you're setting out to fill spots 1 through 25 in every recruiting class with those people who have those 3 things in mind. So, if the people who rate these players like them, then so be it. If not, you have to trust that your coaches have gotten the best people that they could get to fill the spots that had to be filled. So, there are a lot of people in my chat who are up in arms about the 2026 quarterback recruiting. They had a bunch of great 2026 quarterbacks on campus for the camp, and right now they haven't got one. And they're all, like 8 of the top 10 quarterbacks for 2026 have committed elsewhere. Well, when you have 5 scholarship quarterbacks and 4 of them on paper are due back the following year, and one of them is Julian Sayin, and another one's Aaron Noland, and another, actually 5 of them, when you count Tavian St. Clair, would be on paper, and another one's Tavian St. Clair. Who are you expecting to lure, to fight with those 3 guys for playing time out of the 2026 class? Who are you expecting that you're going to land? You got 3 of the best 20 quarterbacks in the previous 2 cycles. I mean, who are you thinking is who in their right mind would come to Ohio State in 2026 to, swim upstream against those guys? So, it doesn't do any good to get upset about it or worry about it. It's understandable. They showed him the chalkboard. They said, we got, in all honesty, we got the nation's number 1 player come in next year, Tavian St. Clair. Yeah, he's going to be at your position. Yeah. Well, good luck to you. Yeah, it's kind of like, I'd pick up my ball and go to Georgia or somewhere else too. I mean, what do you people want? It doesn't happen by accident.
Go get him, Tiger.
Exactly.
And we've seen Tavian St. Clair. He was at 2 or 3 of the June camp days. And I think I said it here before, but Diabell, the 4 or 5-star quarterback that committed to Texas, was at Ohio State like 4 or 5 days before that, working out at camp. Tavian St. Clair would go first. Diabell would go second on all of their drills. And then less than a week later, he's like, I'm going to Texas. I don't think these 2 things are unconnected, where you see like, who is the guy in front of in the class in front of me? It's that guy. Well, let's go to Texas instead and see what's going on there. And there is a guy that there have been several quarterbacks on campus, as Steve said, that worked out this past month and ended up committing to other schools. And I think Tavian St. Clair has a lot to do with it. Julian Sayin probably has a lot to do with it. And sometimes you're just going to have to, skip a class. Not that they won't take one, but sometimes you have a class that ends up. They had Brock Glenn committed, last year, a year before that. Like sometimes you're not, fishing among the best, and you're going to get somebody a low 4-star guy, and you make do with it. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But it's hard to just get 5-star after 5-star after 5-star.
I think Mika has a good point there with Nathan Bernard. I think the player from Ashland, Worcester, somewhere up that way, Findlay, I don't know, somewhere northern Ohio. He's a good-looking player. Coaches have had him in camp. They know what they're getting with him. So if they do offer him and they do take him, then we'll see. That would be a potential get for 2016 or 2026 to take the Ohio guy to fill that spot.
But that's an Ohio guy who has big time offers as well. And so then it
Yeah.
becomes do you want to be a Buckeye more than you want to play? And can you convince them that they can play at Ohio State when they've really, if they haven't offered him to this point, then I think that that's a pretty good tell in terms of how they feel. So to then offer him and say, we think you can play is kind of a tale of two stories there.
A few minutes ago, we had it posted, and I shouldn't have gone away from it because now I can't find it. Steve delivered for us the numbers that for many Ohio State and Michigan fans are ingrained in our brains. But he had the coaches' records during his lifetime, which matches up with my lifetime. I've got the same numbers as you, Steve.
Yeah, I was born February of 68.
I was 3 months behind you.
I have all this committed to memory, and I've written all kinds of articles about the history of this. And it's amazing that Bo has that 5-4-1 edge in the 10-year war over Woody. Remember, he upset him in 69. Ohio State was injury plagued in 71, and Michigan beat Ohio State. And then, of course, Bo won the last 3 games between them in 76, 77, and 78, 2 of those in Columbus. So in the 10-year war, he had 5 wins. Woody had 4, and they had the 1 tie in 1973. And then Earl was 5-4 against Bo and got fired. Obviously that was, he couldn't get off the 9-3 schneid. And then Coop, everybody's committed that one to memory, 2-10-1. Tressel 9-1, the Fickle year, 0-1. Meyer 7-0, Day 2-3.
Are you sending a message there, Steve, on the Ryan Day record?
Well, the facts are the facts. I mean, you can't deny what's undeniable. So maybe this is a year that he'll get it back to 500 and then go on a little bit of a run here. I guess we'll have to wait and see.
So if you add up those wins, it comes to 30. So Steve's correct on the 29. I came up with the same numbers, Steve, 29, 24, and 2.
Yeah.
So Ryan Day, of course, 1 and 3.
Oh, Day's only 1 and 3. Okay, I'm sorry.
But it still adds up to 29, 24, and 2. That's my lifetime record as well in this series. Do you have those numbers for us, Tony?
I thought Day coached him twice. I guess not.
Yeah. And there's no telling how that 2020 game would have gone. That was a complete toss-up as a 30-point favorite, and it could have gone anyway.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and count it. So he's 1 and 3. My apology.
But it still comes out 29, 24, and 2. So just a little exercise for Ohio State and Michigan fans to gauge what the rivalry has looked like during your particular lifetime. All right, guys. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate you doing this. As always, support Tony, BuckeyeHuddle.com, Buckeye Weekly. And what's going on over there this week?
It's July. I think I'm trying to take it a little bit easy this week, but still producing content, still throwing out some Ohio State predictions. I think the one I wrote today, one of the predictions is that Cody Simon will have 100 tackles this year he'll be the 3rd player in the last decade for the Buckeyes to have 100 tackles in a season. Doesn't happen as much as it used to. Think it's going to happen for him. And so you can check that out at BuckeyeHuddle.com, talking about the upcoming season. Of course, Buckeye Weekly dropped a kind of a bold predictions episode for the season a couple days ago. So you can check that out at all of your podcast platforms.
Steve, what's going on?
Not a whole heck of a lot. Obviously, we'll be all over this commitment today if it comes down with Justin Hill here in a little while at 1 o'clock. The outstanding defensive end from Cincinnati Winton Woods. There was a basketball commitment earlier this week. Dorian Jones from Richmond Heights committed to Ohio State, and Jake Diebler, national top 60 prospect. And I was at Midwest Live this past weekend, a big basketball event up in Sandusky with a lot of the top high schools. And so July is a big basketball recruiting month with the Adidas and Nike tournaments. I might try and get out to one of those here in the weeks ahead. In 3 weeks from today, Tone, we will be in the car headed west to Indianapolis, and we have a date at St. Elmo's Steakhouse on that Monday night. Mark, if you're in town, you're welcome to join us as well. Monday night reservation, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the biggest Big Ten preseason media event of all times. So
3 days.
3 days, 6 teams each day. And I think it's Ohio State's the first day, and then Michigan's, I think, the third day, and the West Coast schools are sprinkled in there. And so it's going to keep us on the edge of our seats for 3 days. So, yeah, I can't wait.
Yes. Pretty soon the Big Ten is going to be in the big leagues with the SEC and go for a full week. If they keep it up, they'll be playing, at the SEC's level where it just means more.
The next step is spring meetings, like the SEC does in
Spring
Vegas.
meetings. Yes.
Yeah.
Blue
Maya,
Wolverine on our way out the door, guys. What is each host's favorite piece of Ohio State memorabilia?
I don't really have any. I like the Rose Bowl pins that we get when we get them, but nothing for me.
Know.
You're not a memorabilia guy, Tony?
No.
You don't collect stuff?
I don't have a ton of stuff, but one of my favorite things that I have, because these are two of my favorite people, my friend Sonny Brockway went to the Heisman Trophy ceremony in 1995 when Eddie George won, and he got a picture of Archie Griffin with Eddie George with the Heisman Trophy. And so I went in to do an interview with Archie Griffin, and I showed him the picture, and he said, "Can you get me a copy of that?" And I said, "Here, take this one." So I gave him my copy, and I eventually got him to sign another copy of it. And then when Eddie was doing his pro day, I pulled him aside after his pro day workout, and he signed his side of it. And that's probably the best piece of memorabilia that I have, and that was from almost 30 years ago. One of the neat things, I read that as bowl memorabilia. Our friend Ari Wasserman out of the Fiesta Bowl one time walked out of the stadium with a big Fiesta Bowl sign or something or the other, and he showed up back at the hotel with it and brought it in to the hospitality room, and one of the volunteers said, that's not your property, that's our sign, I need you to give me that back. And our friend Heath Schneider, who's friends with Dave and myself, who was helping us on some of the bowl trips, gather interviews, was standing right next to him, who was a friend of the volunteer. And the volunteer had a Fiesta Bowl pullover on, and Heater didn't bat an eyelash. He just said to the guy, "Hey, can I have your shirt?" So that's one of the great bowl memorabilia moments of all time. The guy was calling out Ari for stealing the sign from the spaceship out there in Glendale. And then he brought it back to the hotel and showed it off in front of everybody. Got caught red-handed by the volunteer, and Heater, playing along, asked the guy if he could have his shirt. It's too much. Sometimes it's just too much. What can you do?
Two things come to mind for me. Well, first of all, I would have thought at this stage of my life that I would have like a house full of Ohio State memorabilia, because the way I was going in my teens and in that stage of life, I held on to every T-shirt forever and all of that. Like I thought I would just have plaques and pictures everywhere, and that was the most important thing to me. And then you get a little bit older, and now I'm just purge. Who cares? Get rid of it. I ditched like 15 boxes of Sports Illustrateds a couple of years ago. Just get rid of them, throw them away. I used to keep them pristine and keep every one from back to 1979. So anyway, one would be, I was newly married. So my wife and I were invited to a Buckeye bash in Mansfield, and Archie Griffin was there, and she snuck out behind me and was able to get an autographed book of Jack Park's, one of his Ohio State renditions from Archie Griffin. Lo and behold, then it was about 7 or 8 years later, I'm in Mississippi, of all places, as a sports director on a CBS station there. Archie Griffin's in town to speak to the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and I was asked to host the event. And so I got to meet Archie Griffin, and he was kind enough this is just speaks to the man. Doesn't know me from anyone, even though I was able to present this book to him and say, like 8 years ago, you signed this book for me as a birthday present. So I didn't get to meet him that night because my wife had it signed as a birthday gift. That Archie Griffin came to the TV station for the 6 o'clock news, and my sportscast was entirely, it was basically me telling between the lines my audience, screw you, screw Mississippi today. I'm going to sit with Archie Griffin. I don't care what happened today in sports. We're going to sit in the newsroom and just talk for 5 or 10 minutes. And that's what we did for the sportscast. But he was nice enough to come down to the TV station and sit for 5 or 10 minutes,
That's awesome.
Wait the customary 45 minutes until while we're waiting for the news and all of it to transpire. Exactly, Steve. So, yeah, just a great guy.
My wife, we moved from one house to another last year. In my office I'm a hoarder, and I've got programs from just about every game I've covered for football going back 25, 26, however many years it is. And so I go through and I took 10 bins of stuff to recycling and probably about 15 bins of stuff that I had to keep here to the new house. And the issue is it's sitting out in the garage, and I rarely, if ever, reference or look at any of it. And I have decided that I'm going to go through all those programs from 30 years of doing this and figure out, okay, Michigan programs keep one of each. Everything else, unless it's like Notre Dame or a big bowl game or something, is probably, garbage or whatever. And I'm going to give it away to whoever wants it. And, they can make a donation to our church does a thing where they feed local kids during the summer lunch when they can't go to school and get the free lunch or whatever. And, we may take a donation to that program and, get rid of, half of my garage out there is full of my stuff. So I've been here a year and I haven't touched it. And Tony, as I said, 3 weeks, got 3 weeks. So here we go.
And the other quick memory that comes to mind is, again, this doesn't show me to be a very bright person, because my significant other about 10 years ago was able to ask me, who is your favorite? I'm just curious, who's your favorite Ohio State player of all time? And she had no idea who Art Schlichter was, let alone could spell his name. But somehow, boom, my next birthday or Christmas was the Art Schlichter signed jersey. So that was nice.
There you go.
2 wildly different people and representatives of Ohio State.
Yes. You started to say that, and I was thinking of the other person in the story. But anyway,
our buddy Jeff Snook is an author and covered, college football for a while at West Palm Beach Post, I think. And so we're talking one day during the whole Urban Meyer thing about, writing a book or this, that, or the other. And I said, like, for instance, Art Schlichter, I can't write a book on him about his redemption because he never stays redeemed. You'd lose all of your credibility. And Jeff said, I did a book on Art Schlichter. I was like, I felt like this big. I was like, oh, I'm sorry, whatever. But redemption is not at least for him, is not something that's an enduring situation. So.
And on that note, Steve, Tony, you guys are phenomenal. Thank you so much for being here. Our next show, everyone, Iowa Hawkeyes Live, typically on Tuesday, is this afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. All right, guys, appreciate you being here. Have a great rest of your week. We'll see you back here, everyone, next week.
That's it.